today I'm going to give you a review of John Ford's 1941 Oscar-winning movie Our Green Was My Valley, which was based on the 1938 novel of the same name by author Richard Llewellyn. Now, I said that the movie was Oscar-winning, and it was. In fact, it won 5 Oscars. But when I start, now I'm proud of my connection to Our Green Was My Valley, both the novel and a film, because Our Green Was My Valley, the Welsh coal mining village depicted in the novel, hence then reimagined in the movie, is based on my own village of Gilvercoke, a place where I still live and a place from where I'm now filming. Now, our connection to Our Green Was My Valley is very proudly held by many people who live in Gilvercoke today. In fact, we've even got a blue plaque commemorating the fact on the local community centre that this valley was the influence for Richard Llewellyn's famous novel Our Green Was My Valley, which became the absolutely astounding John Ford 5 Oscar-winning movie, which we're going to talk about. But whilst researching this video, some information for this video, I found that my strong-held beliefs of Gilvert's connection to Richard Llewellyn was rather more tenuous, and hence from Richard Llewellyn to Our Green Was My Valley was rather more tenuous than I believed. Yes, Gilvercoke was the actual village, the actual location that Richard Llewellyn used as the basis for his village as depicted in the novel How Green Was My Valley, but his connection was not as strong as I believed. So let me first tell you what I believed until very recently, and this is the story that's commonly told around the valley of Richard Llewellyn's connection to Gilvercoke, which many people believe and talk about. So Richard Llewellyn, he was an Englishman, not a Welshman. He was born in London, but he was born with Welsh descent. His maternal grandmother was a Llewellyn, was her maiden name, and she hailed from Gilvercoke. And every summer holidays, school summer holidays, Richard Llewellyn would spend at his grandmother and grandfather's place, that's his maternal grandparents' place in Gilvercoke. So he had a lot of knowledge of Gilvercoke. That's what I believed was the connection between Richard Llewellyn and Gilvercoke, but it turns out that's not true. Richard Llewellyn was born an Englishman, which I've always known. His actual name, and I've made a note here, Llewellyn was actually born Richard Vivian Lloyd. Yes, his mother was a Llewellyn by maiden name, but their family did not hail from Gilvercoke. Instead, they came from St. David's, which is the smallest city in the United Kingdom. And Llewellyn actually spent his school holidays with his grandparents, yes, but not in Gilvercoke, in St. David's. Now, that's shocking for me, you know, that's something that, I don't know, it goes contrary to what I've always believed, but it's still, you know, it's a good story. Now, Llewellyn's actual connection to Gilvercoke, the truth about this comes from the fact that when he was researching the novel How Green Was My Valley, he spoke to someone at Foyle's bookstore in London, one of the staff there, who was in charge of the Welsh section of Welsh literature and so forth. And this shop assistant, this shop manager rather, told Llewellyn of his own father, who lived in a small Welsh village called Gilvercoke. Now, it's likely that was the first time Llewellyn ever heard the words Gilvercoke. This miner who lived in Gilvercoke was Joseph Griffiths. Llewellyn was interested in this. He wanted to speak to miners because he wanted to gather colour for his novel, because Llewellyn had never been a miner himself, even though he did tell stories that he had once worked down the Welsh coalfields in Gilvercoke. That wasn't true. That was part of publicising his novel and then living up to the success that he got from the novel. And it was only after his death that it was revealed that Richard Llewellyn has actually been born an Englishman. And when they looked into the story and found out that his birth name was actually, as I said, Richard Vivian Lloyd, the Daily Express had a big headline, because How Green Was My Valley was an iconic film, an iconic book. It was well known all around the world, but the Daily Express had an headline that said, "How phony was my valley?" And it basically sensationalised things and tried to debunk Llewellyn's links at all to the Welsh coalfields. But what actually happened was when Llewellyn comes to Gilvercoach, this was when the novel had already been conceived in his mind, but he wanted to gather local colour, and so he spent time with a miner from Gilvercoach, Joseph Griffiths, and no doubt Llewellyn walked around the valleys looking at the various coal mines that existed during that period. But that was actually Llewellyn's connection to Gilvercoach, my village. So still, we can still proudly boast that our village was the inspiration for the novel How Green Was My Valley, and for the novel, via the novel, the film and so forth, which has always made me feel rather cool, because John Ford is one of my favourite directors of all time. John Ford, of course, worked with John Wayne in a great many movies, and I'm a massive John Wayne fan, so I kind of think, this degrees of separation, that in a way it linked me with John Wayne, because I'm from Gilvercoach. Gilvercoach is the village that Richard Llewellyn based his novel How Green Was My Valley on. How Green Was My Valley was directed, the movie version was directed by John Ford, who was worked with John Wayne so much, hence my connection to John Wayne. Turns out it's a lot more tenuous than I thought, but still, I still have the honour of being from Gilvercoach, the village, the area that inspired the novel How Green Was My Valley. Both the novel and the movie adaptation by John Ford, the main public house in the book is called the Three Bells, and it's these remains here is where the actual public house that it was based on, which was the Six Bells Hotel, sat. It was demolished in the early 70s when it was a reclamation scheme, and tidied up, and this picnic area was made here, but as is usual with Rhondda Cynon Council, they've allowed it all to fall into disrepair and ruined. But this spot that you're looking at now is where the Six Bells was, which was the basis for the Three Bells public house, which was featured in the world famous movie and novel. What's rather fitting, the fact that John Ford directed the movie version of How Green Was My Valley, in relation to the fact that I've just put everyone straight on the actual connection to the author Richard Llewellyn, and the story that I believe growing up that Richard Llewellyn's grandfather had come from Gilvercoach and he spent all his school summer holidays there. But the reason I say it's fitting that John Ford directed the movie, because of course in the excellent, exceptionally good western The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, there's a line, and it goes, I wrote it down not to misquote it, because this line is often misquoted. The actual novel that the line comes from, originally the novel the line went, "When you have to choose between history and legend, print the legend." But in the John Ford movie, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, that line was changed, and it became the much more musical, in the sense, the way it rings on your ear, far more striking. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend. And so I think I'll stick with my long-held beliefs that Richard Llewellyn's grandparents lived in Gilvercoach, and that the young author spent all his school summer holidays here in Gilvercoach, and he knew Gilvercoach well. I think I'll choose to continue to believe that, even though I know the truth now is rather more prosaic. Yes, Richard Llewellyn did come to Gilvercoach. He came here, spent time with a miner, researched the Welsh coalfield, wandered the hills, looked around the valleys, sort of soaked in the atmosphere and the feeling of Gilvercoach, but he did that in a few short weeks rather than spending so many idyllic childhood summer holidays here. But anyway, let's talk about How Green Was My Valley. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to read a newspaper article from 1999, bearing in mind, of course, that Richard Llewellyn had died several years previously. An article which appeared in the Observer on Sunday the 5th of December 1999, and for its headline it used an headline that had been published earlier in another newspaper which I told you about earlier on, and that headline was "How Phony Was My Welsh Valley." And it's said that an author of best-selling mining novel was an Englishman at Claridge's. So I'm just going to read this really quickly for you. A note of discord echoes in the Welsh valleys this weekend as one of the nation's most famous literary sons stands exposed as a fraud. He wrote one of the best-loved novels of the 20th century and had created an image of Wales that went around the world. Richard Llewellyn's How Green Was My Valley was made into an Oscar-winning film, becoming a screen classic that established the stereotype Wales has never escaped, and that is fact. And a lot of people who've never been to Wales, you know, they've got this twee image of we still all running around with mining helmets on with little torches, you know, and warming ourselves by a candle and bathing in tin baths. But anyway, back to the article. The author of the evocative tale of a Welsh mining family was actually born in England, and his real name was Vivian Lloyd. It was actually Richard Vivian Lloyd, but we let that go. Throughout his life and until his death in 1983, he spun a web of deceit about his background. Unable to attempt a Welsh accent, he blamed his chipped English tones on his time in the military. Now, he claimed to be the miner's son, born in St David's, who worked down the pits at Gilverthcote. Which is where his novel was set, but that wasn't true. As the article tells us, he was actually born in Hendon, London in 1906, the son of a publican. His first job was washing dishes at Claridge's. His knowledge of mining came from a family who ran a Charing Cross Road bookshop in London. And these families, they were the Griffiths family, as I mentioned earlier. And so one of the Griffiths' sons, the Griffiths was involved in the Welsh section of Foyle's bookstore in Charing Cross, put Llewellyn, of course, in touch with his grandfather, who was from Gilverthcote, which is how Llewellyn came to Gilverthcote. But the newspaper article goes on to tell us it was not until How Green Was My Valley made Llewellyn a rich man that he actually spent some considerable time in the country he claimed as his own. He bought a farm in Pembrokeshire, but stayed only briefly, spending most of his time at his Claridge's suite, a dishwasher turned VIP guest. In fact, behind the fiction was uncovered by researchers looking for a way to celebrate this year's 60th anniversary of the book, this being 1999. Arwell Ellis Owen, a producer for BBC Wales, discovered a forgotten archive of Llewellyn's papers at the University of Texas in America. And what he discovered when these papers came to light was that much of what Llewellyn told the world about himself was a load of baloney. But as I said about the John Ford movie, it becomes truth rather. Print the legend. And so that article there pretty much sums up the actual truth, which is something that I've only discovered recently, but it doesn't sour my feelings towards Richard Llewellyn, nor How Green Was My Valley. I still, the link, I suppose, to Gilverthcote is not as strong as I believe, but it's there, you know. But not everyone felt the same way when Llewellyn's fraudulent past came to light. Professor Ian Bell of Swansea's University accused Llewellyn of being xenophobic and said that his false image of Wales is deeply xenophobic. He said it created a divide between South and North Wales and between Wales and the rest of the world, and it's racist, he claimed. But, you know, that's it. That's basically the truth behind How Green Was My Valley. Let's talk a little more about what was an exceptional film, and in all truth it did come from an exceptional novel. An exceptional novel. The movie from John Ford as a movie, and I'm not going to go into any of the controversy surrounding the fact that the original author, Richard Llewellyn, falsified a lot of his history to appear far more Welsh than he was. I mentioned that much in the introduction, but I'm going to talk about it now as a movie now. How Green Was My Valley, of course, won the Oscar. It won Oscars. It took Best Picture and Best Director in its year of release. It also won 3 other Oscars, and it famously beat Citizen Kane for Best Picture of that year. Citizen Kane, which has since become regarded as the finest movie ever made, but of course that's all subjective. I do love Citizen Kane. I think it's a fantastic movie. But How Green Was My Valley is also a fantastic movie, even if it perpetuates a lot of the myths surrounding what it means to be Welsh and what the Welsh valleys are like. In fact, some of the myths and stereotypes of the Welsh valleys were actually invented by this movie. I'm going to pull myself... Okay, now the cast of How Green Was My Valley is made up of a very young Roddy McDowall playing Hugh Morgan. Hugh Morgan is the narrator of this story. When the film opens up, it's narrated by the adult Hugh Morgan, voiced by Irving Pinchel, but he remains unseen. We see scenes of him wrapping together a package right at the opening of the movie, but we don't see his face, we just see his arms and parts of his body. And then he's narrating his own story, and so we go back and Roddy McDowall is playing Hugh Morgan. Walter Pidgeon plays Mr. Merdrin Gruffydd, the pastor of the village chapel. Maureen O'Hara is Angharad Morgan, and Angharad, who is the older sister of Roddy McDowall's character, falls in love with Mr. Griffith, and that causes problems later in the movie because she is married, or becomes married in this movie, to the son of the local mine owner, a very important man. Donald Cusp is Gwilym Morgan. Sarah Allgood is Beth Morgan. Anna Lee plays Bronwyn. Patrick Knowles stars as Ivor Morgan. We got Barry Fitzgerald as Sinfara. Rhys Williams as Di Bando. And the Di Bando character is brilliant in this. There's a rather brutal scene where Roddy McDowall's character, Hugh Morgan, he's very intelligent and he goes to a grammar school, the first one of his family to do so, and when he gets in a little fight with another student, he is ferociously beaten by a cane by his teacher. Di Bando then turns up the following day and proceeds to give the children a free boxing class, a lesson in boxing, and he uses the teacher who beat Roddy McDowall in order to set the lesson. Now, would you measure a man who would use a stick on a boy, 1/3 the size? Tennis. Now, you are good in the use of a stick, but boxing is my subject, according to the rules laid down by the good Marquis of Queensberry. Good rest his soul. And happy I am to pass on my knowledge to you.
Mr. Martin! Mr. Martin!
All right, get him in position now. Yes. Now, look, to make a good boxer, you must have a good right hand, you see. Watching this film now, it's a beautiful film, and the cinematography is excellent, and the black and white photography is really crisp. John Ford said a number of times that black and white is real cinema, and I think I tend to agree with him. The removal of colour from an image, monochrome image, it's somehow more cinematic. And well done well, it's really beautiful to look at. But anyway, the South Wales village, which is based on the village of Gilvercoch, as I mentioned earlier in this video, Gilvercoch, okay, of where I'm from, and I'll be attaching a little video into this video, which is a prose poem I wrote about growing up in Gilvercoch. It's called Gilvercoch, a Memory, and that'll be edited into this video somewhere. Now,
Gilvercoch. When I was growing up, I was told the name translated to Red Valley or Red Nook. Whatever the correct translation, it matters not, for the etymology of each word is pretty much the same. A valley is a low, often secluded area of land between two mountains, while a nook is a secluded cranny, a remote and sheltered spot. And in a modern let's-get-in-our-cars sense, Gilvercoch is indeed remote. There is one road in and one road out, which often leads outsiders to mock the small community. But if you were born in Gilvercoch, raised there, then this beautiful valley will always be in your blood, forever calling you. There now follows some memories, personal to me but perhaps meaningful to others. For all of us who have ever lived in the valleys, each of us who have ever gazed up through smog-filled skies to a star-clustered universe beyond, who have puffed up steep streets and slid down grass-flattened bankings, swum in the rivers, climbed the trees, all of us who have done these things share a common bond. That bond is Gilvach Goch, a place, but more than that, for it truly is a pooled molecule within our DNA. Friday nights and Sunday afternoons, those were my times to visit the Workman's Hall. In the years I grew up, during the 1970s, the hall was used as a cinema, a bingo hall and a library, but it was the cinema that was my interest. I would often see the same film. Multiple viewings of titles such as Star Wars, Grease and the Bruce Lee Kung Fu movies loom large in my mind. It wasn't expensive to go in, though we would often sneak in. As schoolboys our economy was built on dirty pennies, hard earned by pushing newspapers through doors or selling manure collected from the mountainside. You had to be frugal then, and one of us would pay and then surreptitiously, avoiding beaming torches and bad-tempered ushers, sneak around and open the fire exit and let a dozen more in for free. Those were the days, and being a lifelong film fan, I think I loved the Workman's Hall most of all. Gilvach Goch Workman's Hall opened in 1924 and provided facilities broadly typical of miners' institutes in this period, including a cinema, capacity 556 seats, providing films and variety performance. With the closure of the local colliery in 1960, the institute suffered and was eventually demolished in the early 1980s. Today the site is occupied by modern housing. It cost a little more to sit upstairs, and we would often pay for a downstairs seat, the budget option, and then go to the toilet, and when the lights went out we would make our way upstairs. Sometimes we would be caught, but more often we were not. It was better upstairs, and if the film bored us, we would have the option of dropping sweets over the balcony onto the heads of those below. Let's go down the river, boys. Come on, come on, come on. The sun always seemed to shine on us whenever we weren't in school. Skip, jump and run, the days were always fun. Back then we had no video games to keep us indoors, and mothers would sweep us out in the morning and tell us to be back for tea. Down the woods we went. It was where we always played, paddling through the river or hiding in the ferns. Crab apples and blackberries, windberries too, would provide us sustenance and a stomachache to boot. We would dam the river, make a pond, and sit there smoking stolen cigarettes and drinking Corona pop. Soon word would get around that a dam was built, and the kids would come down from the top of Gilvach, the village and the site. The farmer then a-huttering, "Get off my land, I'll have the dog on you." That spoil sport in a flat cap would come along and tractor through our dam to keep us from his land. But when he was gone we'd build again. We were industrious like that. The woods would also provide much fun. When we were young our imagination would transform the maple, oak and sycamore trees into the wild, wild west. And as we got older the trees provided shade to kiss and cutch our girlfriends, and sometimes get a bit of top. And so, there we have it, Gilvach Goch, and just a memory or two. There's so much more I could tell you, of characters that I've known. Jackie Bull, 5'0" with bicycle legs like tree trunks, Furnival the Breaker, and his ever-present cigar, Ray Bonner the Shoe, Kitty Badmans and Glyn TV too, Di Bando stood on the village square in rain and sunshine too, whilst Emeris told all the bus timetable, and that he was more than able. Knock knock Ginger and British Bulldog, skateboards in the park, screaming for a lark. Gilvach Goch, the little red valley, forever occupies a nook within my heart.
The production couldn't go on location to film. They couldn't come to Wales because of the war. And so close to Florida, a Welsh village was built. So you built on an hill with a big colliery at the top of the hill, and it doesn't look anything like Gilvercote, though it is remarkable. Some of the houses do look like houses I see on my daily travels around the Rhondda Valleys, but it does give a rather sanitised view of how people lived during this period. The Morgan house sold for a start. The actual house is far grander than anything that the coal miners would have occupied during that period. Close to the opening, you see the Morgan family getting paid for their toils, working down the pit all day. You see them collecting their wages. Then those and a load of other miners from the village are walking home, and they burst into song. Nothing like that happened in real life. You know, the Welsh miners, when they come home from work, they were absolutely knackered. They were dead on their feet. They didn't walk through the streets happily singing out like a Welsh voice choir, but it's a rather effective scene. But there are so many Welsh stereotypes, certain things. Tussle's the shop, for a start. The lady in Tussle's the shop is dressed in a traditional Welsh costume, and once you get rid of her customer, she's straight out sweeping away at the stoop. I remember when I was growing up back in the 1970s, you know, you'd often see women with their hairnets in and their pinnies scrubbing their steps and sweeping their stoops. The courtship, which more or less starts off the film between Bronwyn and Ivo, is really well done. It's rather charming to watch. And I was very impressed during the wedding, which takes place in a local chapel, of how much the chapel looks like a traditional Welsh chapel. But growing up in a mining community myself, I never saw anyone as glamorous as Maureen O'Hara. We go through the miners' strike, a strike that lasts for 22 weeks after the wages are slashed and sees the Morgan family torn apart. Socialism starts to rear its head, and it causes friction between the patriarch and the sons. It's really good. We see a mining disaster in which Ivo Morgan is killed. It's a sentimental movie, and it does tug at the heartstrings, but besides all that, it's a damn good movie. As I say, it won 5 Oscars. It was actually nominated for 10, but it took 5. And it's like John Ford, probably the most American of directors, made a great film set in Ireland with The Quiet Man, which actually filmed a lot of that in Ireland. Our Green Was My Valley didn't come out of America. The production didn't come out of America and didn't film in Wales at all, which is kind of disappointing. I mean, it would have been amazing, I imagine. I wasn't born when this film was made, but it would have been amazing for the people of Gilvercote to see John Ford and his crew turn up here to film. But overall, Our Green Was My Valley is a wonderful film, if very twee and not really representative of the hardship that the South Wales miners faced on a daily basis on the coalfield. They certainly didn't go home from work singing. They went home from work with blistered hands and feet, you know. But still, as a movie, it is fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I've watched it a few times before, but this time I watched it with a more critical eye because I knew I'd be talking about it for this short video. But it's not for me to pick faults in a movie, because there aren't really. As a narrative, it works really well. I mean, it comes from a master director such as John Ford, so why shouldn't it? And it's not for me to sully this movie nor the novel, and I will be talking about the How Green Was My Valley novel, devoting a special video to a review of the novel, which I have read once before, but I'm starting to reread. I actually started it this morning before I did this video, so I will be talking about the novel in a future video on this channel. So please, if you've enjoyed this video, then please give me a subscribe the channel, help it grow. Click the little bell and all to be notified whenever I upload another video. Give this video a thumbs up and maybe leave a comment. To be honest, I don't think it really matters that Richard Llewellyn was actually a semi-detached Welshman and didn't have as much of a connection to Gilbert Goat as he claimed after the success of his novel. I mean, he was a fiction writer, you know, and it can be argued that fiction writers tell lies for a living, you know. So I don't think that really matters. What matters is the fact that Richard Llewellyn did spend time in Gilbert, even if it was only a limited period of time, and he talked, thanks to Mr. Griffiths, to a lot of coal miners in and around the Gilbert area, and he did soak up a lot of the atmosphere, and he looked, you know, he went around the village visiting the mines that were still operating during that period. So, you know, Our Green Was My Valley remains a strong part of Gilbert Goat's identity. Who cares? As I say, when the legend becomes truth, print the legend.